welcome to the MISK panel by Youth for Youth, hosted here at the NEOM House. I'm truly privileged and honored to be moderating today's session, but I have to say I'm particularly excited about our panelists today. So I'm Manar Al Moneef, and I'm honored to be your moderator on the discussion for today, the Youth Blueprint for Responsible Leadership in an Intelligent Age. And to be quite frank, as someone who's part of the youth, it's impossible not to reflect on the landscape that's happening today, the ever-changing landscape, innovation. And as exciting as that is, it obviously represents some challenges, right? So it requires creativity, collaboration, and most importantly, responsible leadership. And today, we're joined by leaders who embody exactly that drive for responsible change. We're joined by Dr. Manar Al Moneef, the Chief Investment Officer at NEOM, where she's responsible for developing and implementing its investment strategy by creating growth initiatives and building partnerships. Previously, President and CEO of GE Renewable Energy, she held leadership roles in oil, gas, and healthcare. Dr. Manar has an executive MBA from Harvard Business School and a PhD from Leicester University. Next, we have Sneha Dave, the founder and executive director at Generation Patient, where she drives meaningful change for young adults with chronic and rare conditions through direct support and systemic change. Sneha's leadership recognized her as the youngest principal investigator by the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. She's also a youth delegate at the We Are Family Foundation. And finally, making up our panel, we have Faisal Al-Dosari, a research engineer at Aramco, where he leads sustainability projects focused on zero carbon drilling and clean fuel production. Faisal is one of 16 appointees to the Aramco Young Leaders Advisory Board, a corporate platform for young professionals to develop studies on corporate strategy and provide insights to the Aramco Group Strategy Committee. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. So since our conversation is revolving around responsible leadership, I'd like to kickstart a conversation by defining what responsible leadership is or should be in an intelligent age. So I'd like to ask you, Dr. Manar, and start with you. From a senior leadership perspective, how do you define responsible leadership, especially in today's ever-changing landscape? And what role do you see for youth in this landscape as well?
Well, first of all, I'd like to welcome MISK and the entire team to NEOM House. And we were just speaking about a panel about diversity, and we're implementing it here. So Faisal, welcome to a panel full of females over here. So it's great that we follow with the same ambition. When we're speaking about leadership specifically, when we speak about leadership in intelligent age, it's really very difficult to know where to start from. You know, it's evolving and changing on a daily basis. I was talking about what's the change that we see in Davos. You know, a year ago, they were talking about digital twin. It was the theme. The year before, they were speaking of efficiency. This year, they're speaking about AI. It just keeps transforming every day something new that's coming. But what's sustainable over here is the leadership and how leadership is able to drive behavior, how leadership is able to drive outcome specifically, and how do they motivate and prepare the next generation of young talent. That's the most important thing. A leader for me is someone who's visible, someone who's always there, that you can rely on and you can see. Someone who will guide, someone who will mentor. That's the basic foundation of having the right leader that will be able to listen to you and motivate you. I've worked with leaders from across the globe, different nationalities, males and females. And there are few leaders that I will say that stick in my mind and will always have a part of who they made me. I am who I am today because of the things they've implemented, the strategies, the policies, the way that they were able to say, well, no, we're not going to have the meeting if she's not present. The way that they've changed certain systems and processes to say, well, no, everyone needs to be heard. Everyone needs to have equal opportunity. Even when you doubt yourself, if you have a strong leader, he will give you that confidence. It's okay to make mistakes. Mistakes are not the end of the world. You actually learn from them, and you should not call them our mistakes. They are our experiences. Maybe the outcome was not the best one, but it's an experience that made you who you are. Leadership is a very, many people use that phrase, but very few people that actually practice it into what it means. It's actually what do you do not only for yourself and thinking of the I, it's what do you do for the people around you? What are the things that you are providing, the services, the mentorship that you're able to create? And today I found it challenging when we speak about an intelligent world and everything that's going. Sometimes I feel I am behind, far behind. When I look at Generation Z, you know, last week I was sitting with a 10-year-old that was teaching me how to invest in Bitcoin and how to sell. She's watching TikTok. And that's how they're looking at it. So I feel I'm outdated. I'm not moving with the same speed as this generation. But the foundations are the same. Regardless, you're speaking to Generation Z, you're speaking to my granddad, you're speaking to anyone. It is, what are these foundations? What are you doing and contributing to develop the next generation? What policies and behaviors are you encouraging to make sure everyone have an equal voice?
No, I love that, and I personally even resonate. And I think us being here at NEOM House, it's only natural for me to ask. So we know of the Global Shapers community and them having a NEOM hub. And we know that the NEOM hub is slightly small, but there's a lot of youth representatives. And I know you've been on multiple panels there. So what's it like seeing this, young community thriving and officially kickstarting in NEOM?
It's unbelievably energetic. You go there, you feel that you're on steroids all of a sudden. Unbelievably energetic. They're unbelievable. They're so passionate. They really have the drive to make things different. They really want to reach and achieve their goals. And we actually have one of them with us over here, Fawaz, who's actually one of the global shapers, with us here in Davos. The passion they have is just unbelievable. The drive is nothing like I've saw before. And they are so confident. If you see their confidence, I'll tell you what, 10 years ago, you would not see that confidence with me. You will not see it with many of my generation. The confidence, and they are not scared to say, I don't know, I want to learn. They're not scared to say, you know what, I'm going to be the CEO of that company in 5 years. They have that drive. They feel they have what it takes to speak up. And that's what actually maybe my generation missed, which is that confidence. I wouldn't say that I'm not confident, but simply at that time, we didn't have what it takes to go and say, well, I want to be a CEO. Example, I want to do that, I want to do this. So it's extremely encouraging, and seeing the energy they have, it is just unbelievable. It just gives you a different perspective that, oh my God, imagine these are still junior. Imagine when they run the company. What is it going to look like? So it is extremely energetic.
Amazing. And I mean, I've met Fawaz actually last week. It was my first time meeting him, and we were at a gathering as part of Global Shapers because I'm in the Riyadh hub. And honestly, it's a small world, and I've seen what he's done at NEOM. It's incredible. So building on the theme of youth, I'd like to talk a little bit more on the hands of youth-led initiatives. So my next question is to you, Sneha. Through your work at Generation Patient, how have youth-led initiatives contribute to systemic change? And what lessons can be applied to other sectors beyond healthcare?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Sneha. I am from the US, based in the state of Indiana, and I am the executive director at Generation Patient, which is a nonprofit representing young adults with chronic and rare conditions from Crohn's disease, hemophilia, sickle cell, arthritis, lupus, you name it. We have young adults as part of our community. And I created Generation Patient about 13 years ago when I was 13 years old. Out of my own experiences, I've lived with significant ulcerative colitis since I was 6 years old, and have gone through many surgeries up until now, and realized that there were many many issues that weren't being addressed for young adults who are transitioning from pediatric to adulthood. And just a really quick statistic, over 50% of young adults in the United States actually live with one chronic condition now. So we know that more and more young people are being diagnosed with chronic conditions, not only in the US, but across the world. But there was no organization or no real representation. So our work at Generation Patient now spans everything from peer support initiatives to health policy and research and evidence generation. And so our work in peer support, for example, we've done now nearly 600 peer support meetings over the last couple of years. And given the significant mental health crisis amongst youth, but also particularly to add in a chronic condition, the isolation that our community faces, we believe in peer support as a intervention in our community rather than just a nice to have service. And so we did 600 meetings at this point now. We've partnered with Boston Children's to evaluate and to show the impact of peer support on young people with chronic conditions. And what's really exciting is now that we're scaling our model to India and Ethiopia and working with community partners, our young adult patient peers in those countries to try to bring our model and again to try to hopefully show improved outcomes among young adult patients. And then another big issue that we work on is health policy in the United States. So our community was responsible for driving one of the first pieces of legislation addressing false and misleading pharmaceutical advertisements on TikTok and Meta. This is just an issue actually specific to the US and New Zealand because no other country allows pharma ads. But I was really proud because this was an effort that was driven by lived experience of young people who were being inundated with advertisements on social media without adequate regulation. And this was a bipartisan issue. And I think we also do work in patents and other health policy areas, but I think the one thing for us has been the value of evidence generation because unfortunately we lack a significant amount of data for young adults with chronic conditions. And I think there's a lot of data gaps for young people in general about what are the most pressing needs that we're facing right now. And so one of our models that I think can be implemented in other spaces, and maybe already is really having young people drive the research and have researchers sort of insert themselves where we feel like the research questions need to take place. That was an example with our peer support work, with our health policy work. And so I think that's a huge opportunity is for researchers to partner with young people to figure out what's happening in our communities and hopefully drive more outcomes then.
Thank you. I think what you guys are doing is incredible because you're not just targeting diseases or issues that could easily be accommodated in hospitals. So kudos to you. I think one of the things that you talked about, which is patents, and I know that's quite lots of work has to do around that in healthcare. But something that you said that I personally resonated with, and I think amidst the controversy with TikTok recently, is misinformation. As a person who uses TikTok, to be honest, for some of my sources, what's I guess one advice you'd have for users? Because one thing that we're definitely not going to do is stop them from using it. So how can we sort of spread that informed, I guess you can say, content?
Yeah, I think it's really important to ask, is this post being sponsored? First of all, unfortunately, not all posts have sponsorship labels clearly, which can be very problematic because you don't know who's actually talking behind an influencer, for example. So I think asking the questions in the comment sections, wherever that is, to yourself, where is this information coming from? Is this evidence-based? I think now with, there's more open access to research, so young people can go online and find information that's evidence-based. But I think it's a huge problem. And I almost think that instead of young people having to be the ones to sift through this information, it should be regulators that are changing the environment. Companies need to do a better job of creating safer spaces online because unfortunately, and maybe not unfortunately, but it's not up to young people to have to sift through this information either. So
true. I'm writing mental notes as you speak. Building on the theme of responsibility and youth, I'd like to turn to Faisal. So as a young professional leading sustainability projects at one of the largest companies around the world, how do you see the youth shaping the future of sustainable and especially innovative technologies now that we're speaking on the intelligent age?
All right, for sure. I think I'll just give a bit more background about me. Like you mentioned, I work on sustainability technology development, but more specifically, it's not just pure academic research. That part of it is research and academia, but the bigger part is actually developing products, commercial or otherwise. Part of it is done in-house with technical people. Part of it is also collaborations and managing those collaborations. And I say this because I don't think I can give you a representative answer of youth in technology in general. It's kind of more specific. Youth working on technology not in academia and at a large corporation, because I think that's also a very unique case, and that's what my lived experience really is. I don't think there's a shortage of very competent youth. I think if you're at Davos, you've seen this, you know this very well. A lot of people here are well educated, and especially in the hard sciences, I think that's definitely a very important qualifier before we kind of jump into talking about leadership. And so where I work at the energy company and in Saudi in general, I've met so many bright young people who are very accomplished. I think maybe one of the biggest bottlenecks is kind of transitioning from just being curious, smart, trying to learn, typically, coming out of college, to trying to lead something productive. I'm not very familiar with startups, but if you're doing something independent, maybe that transition could be a bit smoother. It's self-driven. But when you do that at a large company, there are many hoops you need to jump into. There's a lot of people whose buy-in you need. And so I think the important question or thing to address for young people interested in technology in these big corporations is, how do you establish your credibility early on and convince people with authority to give you more responsibility? And that's what I've really seen a lot of my peers kind of go through, that struggle of how do you convince people to give you responsibility. The more traditional approach of kind of the corporate process, where it kind of snowballs, you start training and development, you lead one project, you do well, you'll lead a bigger project, and you keep going on and on. There's nothing wrong with that. I find that to be typically a bit slow. It can be slow. I think a quicker way to do it, and this is something that worked for me, is to kind of find proxies to convince people that you can handle responsibility. So in general, I think, like going to a good university, engaging in many programs and extracurriculars, to just speak to kind of your competence on a topic really helps. I find that to really shortcut the conversations that lead to putting you in a leadership position to begin with.
I mean, I love that you say that, especially now that we're here in Davos, where the youth is actually the minority. So I love that representation. I guess I want to shift the conversation to one of the most fascinating aspects of leadership, and it's the intergenerational dialogue that we have. It's very rare that you enter an office and not seeing almost 4 generations working. So you have people from the age of 22 up to 65 or even 70 if they really love what they do. So it's almost natural that you're bound to work with people from these different backgrounds. And it's a powerful opportunity, of course, because you get to learn from each other, but it can also present a risk where someone might not feel like their voice is being heard. So let me begin by asking you, Dr. Manar, how do you think we can ensure that today's efforts create a sustainable foundation for future leaders?
Just to start, I'm not 65. just to make sure that we're clear on that. Well, it's all about, again, creating the systems, the policies, and creating the environment, the culture. It starts with any organization that excel, they have the right culture. A culture that is focused on equity, a culture that is focused, everyone can be heard. I don't care about your age. I don't care about your gender. I don't care about your race, your religion. I care about you as a human being and what are you going to be able to add value to what we're doing. Hearing each other, the dialogue. One of the areas that we're recently seeing that people do not accept debate. There is no debate. If you're not with me, you're completely against me. And that's something that we're seeing. This phenomena is increasing specifically with the new generation, the social media generation. I have nothing against social media, but in reality is we're creating a generation that we need to be extremely careful. That new generation, I'll ask you, when was the last time you saw them holding a book? When was the last time they came down and sat down with you on the table for dinner? I'll tell you, in my household, when the internet is off, they come and sit down with me. That's the new generation. And we need to be careful when that generation come to the workforce. What is the type of system, what kind of jobs they're interested to be created for them? When you speak to the new generation, no one of them wants to work. My daughter always looked at me, she said, I'm never going to be like you. You're a slave for your job. I want to work for myself, create my own company. So there is different expectations. And equally today, in my workforce, as an example, I have a big team. I have people that are 22, people that are 60 plus. And, the dialogue, the basic is the same. Example where I lead finance, so investment, we speak on finance principle are the same. You see the new generations coming with a lot of ideas, their excitement, and so on. The others bring more maturity, more wisdom about hearing you, and let's test the idea, let's validate it. So it's actually striking a balance, but what's important is what culture are you creating, what systems to make sure everyone is heard, And when everyone is heard, at the end of the day, you're always giving them an opportunity. Because youth today is looking for an opportunity. An opportunity is not linked to age or because you're more senior, you're going to get this, you're junior, you're not going to get it. It's simply about the value add. And my advice today for anyone, regardless you're senior, you're junior, in what you're doing, always try to differentiate yourself. Don't say, I'm going to be the best. Differentiate yourself, because when you're different, you're always going to be remembered. And one of the things that we're missing today across the board is you can have a lot of great workers, but how many leaders are you going to create? Not everyone is going to be a leader. So being a leader is a completely different. It has a certain skill set that is required. And it's okay for some not to be leaders. That's okay, because you need to have that mix. But again, being a leader, you need to always have this future thinking, a vision, an ability to always create teams, inspire them, motivate them, because that's what makes a leader.
I love that. Especially, I think nowadays people are like, I need to be a leader. Like, that's the only way I make it. And there are different places for people who don't necessarily see themselves in leadership roles. And that you being a manager or you being someone who's a bit more middle management, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think
it's perfect. It's perfect. I know a lot of females that say, well, my ambition is just to get married and have kids. And that's perfectly okay. That's her ambition. There is nothing wrong. Not everyone needs to be a CEO or need to be the best or to be a professor. You need that diversity, and that's what differentiates people, and that's what makes the economy work, that diversity.
Exactly, yeah. And speaking of CEOs and senior leaders, I'd like to ask Faisal. So I think you've interacted a lot with senior leaders, whether it is at your capacity as a mentee with mentors. So how has that influenced your work, the way that you approach your projects at Aramco and even beyond?
All right, for sure. Again, I'll give a little bit more background just so this can be a bit specific. This is part of my work at the Young Leaders Advisory Board. The company I work for has this kind of youth board, which runs in parallel to your day job. So I have my normal day job, and then after that, we work on projects and studies, typically on strategy. This is like part of the work. That's then sent over to senior leaders at the company. And the whole idea is to kind of give a youth perspective. It's advice, it's proposals for their consideration. The experience has taught me a lot. I think on the topic of like intergenerational gaps, one thing, like one specific example that I think was very enriching for me is I worked, so a part of this program, we have people between 22 years old to 35 years old. While that's not a big gap, it is certainly a gap. And so I was put in a position once where I'm 24 years old, and we were conducting this study which I was leading. And everyone else on the team was 35, and they were experts in their fields. A CFA with 10 years of experience, a CPA with 10 years of experience, a cybersecurity analyst. And we were working on a business challenge. So clearly they are the authority on the subject. Well, now put yourselves in my shoes. How do I approach it when I disagree with these people, right? Definitely they have more authority, but how do I get my voice heard in a very practical way? How do we encourage these debates, these discussions? The people I work with are wonderful, but I think what not to do is the mistake I first got into is trying to over-debate everything, kind of analysis paralysis. I remember I used to create PowerPoints to explain my case to my team to then pursue that path, right? This is kind of work that feels like work but isn't work. And I don't think that's productive at all. They definitely did hear my perspective. They sometimes agreed, but it was just too slow. I think I heard a nice quote yesterday. A better approach. Our colleague said, a decision that you can walk back isn't a decision, it's an action. That's how I think you should approach these intergenerational teams. You need to establish kind of a baseline of trust where if someone feels very strongly about something, we don't need to talk about this too much. Let's pursue what I feel very strongly about. And if we need to walk it back, we will. Since adopting that methodology, I've seen that the work has become much faster, and we really didn't compromise much on having everyone's voices heard.
I love that. So I think one main takeaway is debate, 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 but don't over debate because it can backfire. So I'd like to turn to Sneha. So I know you've been a youth delegate. I think ever since you were 19, I believe, part of the WEF Global Teen Leader. So which means you've worked a lot with senior leaders in a lot of different capacities. So I'd like to ask, so in your global advocacy efforts, how do you foster intergenerational dialogue to voice youth-led initiatives, especially when we don't really see that being discussed or often overlooked? So how's that been for you?
Yeah, so I think just to start off, I don't lead with me saying that I'm a young person because unfortunately there is still a big stigma, and I see the work that we do at Generation Patient as, you know, trying to create systemic change and direct support for young adult patients, but you know, we just happen to be young people leading this effort. And so I think when we foster this dialogue, we come in with our lived experiences and our perspectives, but I don't say we're led by, you know, entirely by young adult patients. Now, they probably can assume, because though I'm 26, I look very young, so there's no secret there. But I think one of the key things that I try to do is try to just create an accessible space up front. I think the way that we talk as young people is very different than the way that you talk as a professional in some of your boardrooms and other conversations. And so I think trying to bring it to a level where, you know, young people can meet people who've been in this industry for a couple of decades is really imperative. I also think when we think about intergenerational dialogue, we always have to think about the young people that are missing from the conversation. And I think a key part of that is when we're in conversation with companies or organizations, we want to make sure that compensation for experience is prioritized, because I think the way that you have true dialogue is by making sure that people are compensated for their experiences and for engaging in sharing what that might look like. So I think that's really key. And I think the last thing I'll say is, as young people, we tend to have to come very over-prepared for almost everything that we do, because of course we're discounted based off the experiences professionally that we might not have. And so I think it's really up to the other people on the other side of the table to value that and to know that even though we might not have the perfect language, we put in a lot of effort into having these conversations and creating this sort of change. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I love that, and I think today's panel is a perfect representation of that. Yeah. So I'd like just to add on one point that you've said. So if we were just to imagine a youth member, so someone, let's say, below the age of 30, entering these big spaces, like Faisal said, where sometimes you don't really have the work experience, what's one advice you'd give to these people entering these large voices, these large places with their voices and potentially looking at what their potential can lead to?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. I'll just tell you a very quick story. Our first major funders, was during my senior year of college, and that really catalyzed the growth of Generation Patient. But I remember asking them what a profit loss statement was. I mean, just very little things that now to me seem very silly, but were things that I just was completely unfamiliar with. And the way that this foundation, absolutely love them, thank goodness for them, was doing things was not really made for people like me who have no background in accounting and dealing with money. But that, you know, truly catalyzed our growth. And so I think being able to ask questions and feeling comfortable with that is huge. And I think one thing I'll add to the last point that just came to my mind is that, especially for those of you who are not part of the younger generation or don't identify as such, I would say that it just really takes one person for us to be able to establish credibility. I think the way that you all interact with young people and can really sponsor them to their next journey can be transformational. The We Are Family Foundation did not tell me to say this, but truly the mentor that I received through the We Are Family Foundation, shout out Allie, raise your hand please, the best person ever. She connected me with a mentor years ago that led to me finding our first funders, and has been truly the bedrock of Generation Patient. And so it really took one person, one interaction, and can make a huge difference in those of us who are trying to create systemic change.
Thank you, and I think that's a perfect gateway to the Q&A segment. So we're approaching the end of our session, and we'd like to open the floor for any questions. So like Sneha said, leverage these amazing panelists that we have today, and then we'll open the floor for any questions. So just a show of hands, I think we have someone who can grab the mic for you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much for this insightful and interesting discussion. My name is Hassan al-Shihri, and I am a university student here in Switzerland. As someone who has recently graduated from high school and is exploring, trying to explore the right pathway for their future, I would love your advice, from your experiences. How do you think leaders can prepare themselves to lead responsibly in an industry that is being transformed and is being dominated by AI and automation? In your opinion, what qualities, I guess, do you think are essential to have to distinguish ourselves from others in a competitive industry like this? Thank you.
I could talk a little bit about my university experience. I think I went through a very similar kind of exploratory phase. I think my opinion is that before jumping into leadership, there's no shame in not leading, in exploring, understanding what's available. I think a big part of differentiating yourself is knowing the options. And I don't think that's straightforward at all. I did quite a bit of exploration before I landed, with my degree and my experience. I studied chemical engineering, by the way. I went through a formal mentorship program where my mentor told me that I was too nice. And if you really want to get what you want in life, you have to be a little bit, you have to pester people, you have to be annoying. And I've embodied it ever since, and it's really worked well. Here's an example. I went to school in the Bay Area, and I was studying engineering. I really wanted to try venture capital, so I emailed a partner at a venture capital firm 15 times across the semester. He wouldn't respond. At some point, he scheduled a meeting, which he didn't attend, but I kept emailing. And then he gave me an internship. And he gave me an internship because I was, determined or whatever, right? Same thing happened in school where I wanted to do research with a professor. I was a freshman with no experience. I just kept annoying this professor until at some point he said, "You're so determined, you really want this. Sure, you can have it." So my advice to you would just be explore everything and then kind of zone in on how you think you should be different.
Thank you very much, Faisal.
Yeah, and sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was just thanking
That was a great answer. Thank you. I really appreciate those anecdotes. But I would just say, I think not similar to what Faisal was saying, but I think one of the things that I think is really powerful about young people is often the integrity that we have of not being jaded by industry interests or whatever that might look like. And I really encourage you and everybody else that we work with at Generation Patient to really maintain that integrity and try to think intentionally about conflicts of interest as you're pursuing careers, things that you're passionate about, because I think going into sort of industries can really create that jadedness. And I'll just give you an example. At Generation Patient, we're one of the very, very few patient advocacy groups in the United States that has declined all private healthcare industry funding. And we did so, not because we have a lot of money, but because we found that it would really compromise the integrity of the work that we did. And I bring in that anecdote because I think as you go throughout your career and as other young people go throughout their career, you'll be faced with choices on who to work with, on what projects to work with, and you can feel free to say no because there will be plenty of opportunities that align with your values. And so I just really encourage you and other people who are younger than me. I'm 26, but I feel like I'm really old on this panel too, so.
I'm 20, so
I know.
that makes you feel any better. We also have the floor for any more questions, so.
Oh, sorry.
I think we have two questions.
Sorry.
They can go out there.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was really inspiring. And I'm wondering, just a poll on the panel, when do we stop being young? I wonder. So just curious what different perspectives are on the panel.
I would say when you start to see the conflicts of interest in the space. It's a very practical answer, but I feel like I've aged significantly over the last 2 years because as I'm growing with my organization, I've had to see sort of the different interests that are, preventing our community from accessing, whether that's life-saving medications, but navigating various systems. So I would say it's less of an age, more of the experiences that you, unfortunately, at some point have to go through. But maybe that wasn't the answer you were looking for.
No, that's a great answer. Thank you. But I mean, I'd love to hear everybody's perspective.
You're still young. You're still young. So, example, I
Thank you.
remember
That's
when
the answer I was looking
when
for.
when I was young, I'll tell you, when I was in my 20s, I used to look at people in their 40s and I used to say, wow, they're old. Now I'm 40, more than 40. I'm just like, well, I feel young. I don't feel that age. At the end of the day, it's when you stop creating ideas, when you stop challenging yourself, when you give up, that's when you feel you're aging. But at the end of the day, age is just a number. If you take care of your health, if you take care of your daily routine, and every day come up with new ideas, new challenges, you're going to feel always, young. And now what's exciting, you mentioned about just, intergeneration and connecting with people. It is just so energetic to hear the youth, to hear the ideas they're coming with. I sit down with 10 years old, and I learn things daily from them. They are unbelievable, this new generation. So, learning is always making you feel young. When you stop learning, this is the time that you start feeling aging.
Those are great answers. I'm not going to add anything.
Just quick question to the to Yam. I think you're both from the United States, yeah?
Saudi.
Saudi, but you were raised in United States or?
Saudi.
Saudi, okay. Educated in
Studied in the US.
Yeah, studied. So because in March I will also be in Harvard Business School for the executive education. I think the university in the United States better than me. So if you can share a little bit insight about the culture in the university, which create or educate better leader or who have a different direction. Could you share something? Because United States is very big and have a lot of good universities.
You mean between like the different universities in the US?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm qualified enough to answer this. I haven't experienced a lot of academic institutions in the US. Just Berkeley, and I went to Berkeley, and then I also went to many events at Stanford. I had friends at Stanford. I don't need to praise them because they get a lot of praise, but it's a very nice environment to learn. A lot of things going on. It's a very vibrant space. So yeah, I'd recommend Berkeley or Stanford as a great university.
Just one more here.
Hi, sorry for being so far back. I think this question's probably more directed to Dr. Manar. What kind of skills and competencies do you think the next generation of young leaders can equip themselves with as they traverse the kind of leadership trajectory? Thank you.
Oh, that's a very tough one. There is soft skills, and then there is professional skills. Professional skills is to have domain expertise in their job and what they're doing. But the soft skills that I will ask the next generation to equip themselves with is the ability to listen. Listen more, we don't do that. The ability to have healthy debates. And it's okay to make mistakes as long as you pivot and change from them. I've made significant changes in my career. I was a physician, by the way. I'm never in investment. I never studied investment. I was a physician by training. Then when I reached into a point, I've said, well, that's too boring. I don't want to continue doing that. I went to one meeting and I've just said, you know what? I'm willing to give everything up and do a significant shift. And I started from scratch. Everyone was against me. No one person, neither family, neither friends, males, no one supported my idea. They thought that I was going through a midlife crisis at the age of 26. What would you think? You've finished your bachelor, master's, PhD, and now you want to ditch everything and start from scratch? But I've said I'm going to learn. And if I don't succeed, what am I going to lose? And you start thinking about it. And that's the mindset that the new generation need to think of. Because if I didn't take that move, I will not be where I am today. Today, I speak to my friends that are still in the medical field. They're doing great jobs, but they're still speaking about the same things day in and day out. I left the medical field over 20 years ago, and they're still speaking about the same thing. Nothing changed. Technology, but the same problems. Today, I speak about the medical field, but I'll equally speak about oil and gas. I speak about renewable energy, and I speak about investment. I've learned. And that's what I ask the new generation. Believe in yourself. Never take no for an answer. If someone tells you no, ask the 5 whys. I come from the GE Jack Welch Institute of Leadership, and it was always never take no for an answer. And if someone tells you this cannot be done, ask why 5 times. If you're satisfied with the answer, that means it's good. If you're not, keep pushing.
Amazing. What an incredible note to end the session. Thank you to each and every one of you for inspiring us today. And thank you all for attending. I really want us to leave today and this incredible week in Davos and really focus on what the youth have to offer. I know that the minority here, but they really are the leaders of the future. And on the note of the intelligent age, it's really an incredible place to be, but it's really up to us to lead and to lead responsibly. So thank you all for joining us today.